Today I'm going to tell you a story so stark and unforgiving it feels like staring down the barrel of a loaded Colt. So vivid you can taste the gun smoke on your tongue. Deep in Bloodstone Valley, where the sun bleeds across a red rock and every horizon promises violence, a lone figure in a black duster tried to live like a shadow. It started with a whisper in a crowded store. The lady doesn't need any new arrangements. Words that cut deeper than any bullet. A forgotten massacre. A town on the edge. A ghost who thought silence could save him. But silence has a price. And the West always collects. The wind came down Bloodstone Valley like it always did in early spring. Dry, carrying the faint iron tang of distant mines and the sweet rot of last year's cottonwood leaves. Caleb's shade, Harlan, drove the last nail into the fence post with a single, measured swing. The hammer rang once, sharp and final. Then silence swallowed it. He stepped back, wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his sleeve, and looked over the new line of barbed wire glinting in the low sun. 5 years of this, and the land still felt borrowed. He led the last 2 steers into the corral, their hooves kicking up small clouds of red dust that hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. The black duster he wore was too heavy for the day's warmth, but he never took it off. Beneath it, the Colt Navy rested high on his right hip, the Remington 1858 cross-drawn on the left, both hidden under the long tails of leather, both carried with the same quiet habit a man carries a wedding ring he no longer believes in. Harlan didn't speak to the animals. He never had. Words had cost him enough once. Now he rationed them like water in July. By mid-morning he rode into Silver Ridge for supplies. The town hadn't changed much since he bought the Barlow place from widow Abigail Barlow 2 years earlier. She'd stood on the porch of the ranch house then, gray hair pinned tight, eyes steady, and said only one thing before signing the deed. Thomas always said this land needs a man who knows how to keep it. Harlan had nodded once. That was all the conversation they'd ever needed. He tied the bay to the rail outside Whitaker's general store. Inside, the air smelled of coffee grounds, tobacco, and old canvas. Sarah Whitaker looked up from behind the counter, offered the small, careful smile she reserved for strangers who might become neighbors. "Morning, Mr. Harlan." "Morning." His voice stayed low, almost lost under the creak of floorboards. He moved along the shelves with practiced economy. Flour, salt, coffee, a tin of peaches he didn't really want, but bought anyway. At the ammunition case, he paused. 20 boxes of .36 caliber, another 10 of .44. Sarah raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as she tallied the order. Deputy Levi Rusty Boone leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, watching. When Harlan reached to pay, his right hand brushed the butt of the Colt. Old reflex, nothing more. Rusty's eyes flicked down, then back up. The boy was young, earnest, still wearing the badge like it weighed more than it should. "You ever think about coming to the town meeting tonight?" Rusty asked. "Sheriff Wyatt's talking about the new rail spur. Folks figure every voice counts." Harlan counted out the coins, set them on the counter one by one. "I figure some voices carry farther when they stay quiet." Rusty gave a half smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Fair enough." Outside, a gust snatched a wanted poster from the board by the jail. It fluttered past Harlan's boots. Faded ink, rough sketch of a man with dark hair and haunted eyes. The reward was old, the crime older. Harlan watched it cartwheel down the street until it lodged against a water trough. He didn't move to pick it up. He never did. He loaded the packs, swung into the saddle, and rode out without looking back. Behind him, the town carried on its small noises. Hammer on anvil, laughter from the saloon porch, the distant clatter of a freight wagon. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. He almost believed them. Back at the ranch, the afternoon stretched long and golden. Harlan unsaddled the bay, rubbed her down with slow circles, let the rhythm of the work push everything else away. The sun dropped behind the dragoons, painting the valley walls in blood and rust. He stepped onto the porch, leaned against a post, and let the cooling air move across his face. That was when he heard it. Distant at first, soft thunder that wasn't thunder. A steady, rolling drum of hooves. 20 horses, maybe more, coming down the main road into Silver Ridge. The sound carried on the thin mountain air, clear as a rifle shot. Harlan straightened. His right hand drifted to the Colt, thumb brushing the hammer, not quite cocking it. Not yet. He stood there a long minute, watching the last light bleed out of the sky. Somewhere in town, a dog barked once, sharp and afraid, then fell silent. The hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped. Voices drifted up the valley, low, rough, laughing in the way men laugh when they know no one will tell them no. Harlan exhaled, slow and controlled. For 5 years he had kept the past locked behind his teeth. 5 years of fence posts, cattle, and silence. 5 years of telling himself the ghost was dead, buried somewhere outside Tucson with a name no one remembered. Now the hoofbeats had found him anyway. His fingers closed around the grip of the Colt. Not tight. Just enough to feel the familiar checkering against his palm. The valley went still. Somewhere far off, a night bird called. A single, lonely note. Harlan stayed on the porch until full dark settled, until the only light left was the faint glow of Silver Ridge below and the cold scatter of stars above. He did not move, but his hand never left the gun. The next morning broke cold and thin, the kind of dawn that makes every shadow look longer than it should. Caleb Harlan rode back into Silver Ridge with the same measured pace, the bay's hooves clipping soft against the packed dirt of Main Street. Dust still hung in the air from last night's riders. 20 sets of prints, fresh and wide, cutting straight through town like a knife through hide. No one spoke of them yet, not out loud. He tied up outside Whitaker's general store again. The bell above the door gave its small, tired chime as he stepped inside. The place smelled of yesterday's coffee and new-cut pine from the shelves Sarah had been repairing. She stood behind the counter, arms crossed, staring at a broken jar of molasses that had leaked across the floorboards in a slow black stain. A whole shelf had been swept clean. Cans of beans, sacks of sugar, a bolt of calico, gone. "Morning, Mr. Harlan," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. He nodded once, moved to the ammunition case without a word. 20 more boxes of 36 seconds. 10 of .44 seconds. The same as yesterday. Sarah watched him count them out, her fingers tightening on the edge of the counter. "Wolves getting bold up your way?" she asked. "Always are," he answered, low enough that the words barely carried. She rang up the total, slid the coins into the till. "They came in last night. 20 of them. Said the town needs protection. Said we pay or we lose more than a shelf." She paused, then added quieter, "They asked about you." Harlan's hand stilled on the last box. He didn't look up. "Asked who owns the Barlow place now, where he came from. What kind of man rides alone and buys so much powder?" Sarah's gaze didn't waver. "I told them nothing, but they'll ask again." He met her eyes then, just for a second. Something flickered there, quick and gone. Not anger, not yet. Just the old, familiar weight settling heavier on his shoulders. "I'll handle my own fences," he said. She gave a small nod, the kind that says she doesn't believe him, but won't push. "Not today." He loaded the ammunition into his saddlebags, stepped back outside. Across the street, two riders sat their horses in the shade of the livery overhang. One tall and lean, the other shorter, thicker through the shoulders. They didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. Harlan felt their eyes like fingers brushing the back of his neck. He turned the bay slow, deliberate, and rode out without hurry. Behind him, the two men exchanged a glance, then spurred off toward the edge of town, toward Bloodstone Valley. All afternoon he worked the ranch in silence, repaired a sagging gate, checked the water troughs, moved the small herd to fresher grass. Every so often he paused, eyes scanning the ridgeline. Twice he thought he saw movement, two dark shapes against the pale rock. But when he looked again, nothing. Only wind moving through the junipers, whispering secrets he didn't want to hear. By dusk, he was back on the porch, cleaning the Colt. The Remington lay beside it, already oiled and loaded. He worked methodically, the soft scrape of rag on steel the only sound in the cooling air. The sky turned the color of old bruises. Somewhere down the valley, a coyote yipped once, sharp and lonely. He heard the hoofbeats before he saw the rider. A lone man on a gray gelding rode up the trail from Silver Ridge, slow and careful. Harlan didn't stand. He just watched as the stranger dismounted, tied off, and approached the porch steps. Tall, weathered, silver at the temples under a battered Stetson. A ranger's badge glinted faintly on his vest, old, worn smooth. "Evenin'," the man said, voice like gravel under boots. Harlan nodded. "Name's Amos Whitaker. Folks call me Sage." He paused, studying Harlan the way a man studies a trail sign he's not sure he wants to follow. "Just rode in yesterday. Heard the town's got new visitors." Harlan kept cleaning the Colt. "Heard the same." Sage took one step closer, stopped when he saw Harlan's hand tighten just a fraction on the grip. "You mind if I ask, you been in these parts long?" "Long enough." Sage nodded, like that answered something. He looked past Harlan toward the darkening valley, then back. "Funny thing about ghosts," he said quietly. "They don't stay buried as long as folks think." Harlan's rag stopped moving. Sage waited a beat, then tipped his hat. "Good night, Mr. Harlan." He mounted up and rode away, hoofbeats fading into the night like a warning bell that hadn't quite rung. Harlan sat there until the stars came out, cold and hard overhead. He finished cleaning the Colt, slid it back into the holster, then picked up the Remington and did the same. When he finally stood, his shadow stretched long across the porch boards, thin and black. He walked to the edge of the porch, looked down toward Silver Ridge. Lanterns flickered in windows, small and brave against the dark. Somewhere in town, in the back corner of the saloon where the light didn't reach, Sage Whitaker leaned against the bar, a glass of whiskey untouched in front of him. He watched the street through the grimy window as Harlan passed by on his way home earlier. Black duster, low hat, the same walk he'd seen once, years ago, outside a burned-out station in New Mexico. Sage exhaled smoke from the thin cigar he'd just lit. The smoke drifted across his face, curling slow in the lamplight. "Lord Almighty," he whispered to the empty room. "Ghost of Black Mesa still alive." The words hung there, soft as ash. Harlan didn't hear them. But as he rode the last stretch home, a thin thread of smoke from someone else's fire drifted across the trail and brushed his cheek. Cool, acrid, like a breath held too long. He reined in for a moment, listening to the night. Nothing answered. The afternoon sun slanted low through the dusty windows of Whitaker's general store, turning the spilled molasses into a slow, dark pool that caught the light like old blood. The air inside was thick with the smell of broken glass, spilled sugar, and the sour edge of fear. Sarah Whitaker stood behind the counter, back straight, hands flat on the scarred wood as if bracing for the next blow. 2 shelves lay in ruin. Cans dented, flour sacks ripped open, white dust drifting across the floor like snow in hell. Zeke Voss leaned against the counter, one boot propped on a broken crate, grinning with the loose, mean pleasure of a man who knew no one would stop him. His brother Silas stood near the door, arms folded, watching everything with the cold patience of a man counting cards. A third rider, scarred, silent, blocked the entrance, hand resting easy on his holster. Zeke picked up a jar of preserves, turned it in his fingers, then let it drop. Glass shattered against the floorboards. "This place is looking a little run down, ma'am," he drawled. "Town needs protectin'. Shame if something happened to it. Or to you." Sarah's jaw tightened. "We pay our taxes. We don't need your kind of help." Zeke laughed, short and sharp. "Taxes don't stop bullets, sweetheart. But a little arrangement might." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath and the horse sweat on his coat. "Unless somebody in this town wants to play hero." The bell above the door chimed once, soft, almost apologetic. Caleb Harlan stepped inside. He didn't rush, didn't draw. Just stood in the doorway, black duster catching the last of the sun, hat low, eyes moving slow across the room. Zeke at the counter, Silas by the door, the third man blocking escape. The store went still, the only sound the faint drip of molasses hitting the floor. Zeke turned, smile widening. "Well, look who showed up. The quiet man from Barlow Ranch." Harlan didn't answer right away. He stepped forward one measured pace, boots soft on the broken glass. His right hand hung loose at his side, not quite near the Colt, but close enough that everyone felt it. Sarah looked at him, really looked, and something flickered in her face. Hope, maybe, or just the desperate wish that someone would do something. Zeke straightened, thumb brushing his gun butt. "You got business here, mister?" Harlan's voice came low, barely above a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the room like the first scrape of a blade leaving its sheath. "The lady doesn't need any new arrangements." The words hung there, not loud, not angry, just certain. Zeke blinked, then laughed again, this time thinner, edged with something uneasy. "You know who we are, friend?" "I know enough." Silas shifted his weight, eyes narrowing. The third man's hand twitched toward his pistol. Zeke took another step toward Sarah, casual, like he was reaching for a can of tobacco. "Maybe you ought to keep walking, mister. This ain't your concern." Harlan didn't move. "It is now." Sarah opened her mouth, maybe to protest, maybe to warn. But Zeke moved faster. His open hand cracked across her cheek, sharp and sudden. The sound echoed off the walls. Sarah staggered half a step, hand flying to her face, eyes wide with shock more than pain. Harlan's breath caught, just for a heartbeat. Something old and buried twisted behind his eyes. Memory of another woman's face, another hand raised, another room full of smoke and screaming. His fingers flexed, then stilled. Zeke rubbed his palm, grinning wider. "You know what about us, huh, you dumb son of a bitch?" Harlan's gaze never left Zeke's. His voice stayed quiet, almost gentle. "I know you burned homes. Shot children first so the parents had to watch. I know the smell of it lingers longer than you think." The grin faltered on Zeke's face. Silas took one step forward. "Careful what you say, rancher." Harlan didn't flinch. "I'm careful." For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was Sarah's shallow breathing and the faint drip-drip of molasses. Zeke finally snorted, backing off a step. "We'll let the boss know you need some convincing." He jerked his head toward the door. The three of them filed out, spurs scraping wood, boots crunching glass. At the threshold, Zeke paused, looked back over his shoulder at Harlan. "We'll tell Black Voss about the hero of Barlow Ranch. He'll be real interested in meeting you." The door swung shut behind them. The bell chimed once more, soft and final. Sarah touched her cheek, red blooming under her fingers. She looked at Harlan, eyes searching. "Why didn't you?" He didn't answer. He just stood there in the middle of the wrecked store, hand closed tight around the grip of the Colt. His knuckles were white. For the first time in years, he let out a breath that wasn't steady. A long, quiet exhale. Raw, almost broken. The sound of a man who had just heard the past knock again. Louder this time, and knew it wouldn't leave without taking something. Outside, the hoofbeats of the Voss riders faded down the street. Somewhere farther off, Widow Abby Barlow was riding home along the valley trail, a basket of cornbread and beans tied to her saddle for the quiet man at Barlow Ranch. She didn't know yet that 2 more riders had peeled off from the main group, waiting in the juniper thicket ahead. Harlan stayed where he was, staring at the broken glass at his feet. Sarah watched him a moment longer, then turned away to start sweeping. The sun slipped lower. Shadows stretched across the floor, reaching for him. He didn't move, but his hand never left the gun. The saloon smelled of old tobacco spit, spilled whiskey, and the faint metallic bite of fear sweat under wool coats. Lamplight flickered yellow across the low ceiling, catching on the haze of smoke that never quite settled. The piano player had let his fingers drift to silence halfway through a slow waltz. Now his hands rested limp on the keys, like they belonged to someone else. Every eye in the room followed the creak of the batwing doors as they swung open again. Harlan Black Voss stepped through first, spurs ringing once against the floorboards before he stopped. Tall, broad through the shoulders, black hat tipped low over eyes that didn't blink often enough. His right hand rested easy on the ivory-handled Colt at his hip. Behind him, Silas Voss moved like a shadow that had learned patience. Coat open just enough to show the twin Remingtons. Zeke Voss came last, already half drunk, cheeks flushed, grin loose and dangerous. The room went quieter still. Men shifted on their stools, chairs scraped back an inch or two. Sarah Whitaker stood frozen behind the bar, rag clenched in her fist, the fresh bruise on her cheek still dark under the lamp. Voss scanned the room slow, deliberate. His gaze settled on the man at the far end of the bar. Back to the wall, hat low, one boot hooked on the rail. Caleb Harlan hadn't moved since he walked in 20 minutes earlier. He'd ordered nothing, just stood there, nursing silence. Voss walked forward, boots deliberate. The crowd parted without being asked. "You're the one they call Shade," Voss said, voice low, almost conversational. "The quiet fella out at Barlow Ranch." Harlan didn't turn, not yet. "Word gets around," Voss went on. "They say you know things, about Dodge City, about Fort Collins, about a little place called Black Mesa." He stopped 3 paces away. "I'd like to hear it from your mouth." A murmur rippled through the room, quick, hushed, gone. Eyes darted from Voss to Harlan and back again. Harlan finally turned. Slow. The movement cost him something. You could see it in the slight tightening of his jaw. He met Voss's stare without flinching, but the hand that rested on the bar trembled, just once, barely noticeable, before he steadied it. "I don't talk much," Harlan said. Voss smiled. Thin. No warmth in it. You talked plenty to my brother Zeke this afternoon. Something about burning homes. Children first. Ring any bells?" Harlan's eyes flicked to Sarah for half a second. She stood rigid, rag dripping onto the bar top. A thin line of blood still seeped from the cut on her hand, where glass had nicked her earlier. Zeke laughed, short, ugly. He's got a mouth when he wants. He swayed forward, pulling his revolver in a loose, drunken arc. The barrel swung toward Sarah. "Maybe we ought to encourage him." The hammer clicked back. The room sucked in breath. Zeke fired. Not at her, not quite. The bullet punched through a bottle of rye on the shelf behind her head. Glass exploded in a bright spray. Amber liquid rained down. A shard sliced across the back of Sarah's hand. She gasped, sharp, involuntary, and blood welled fresh, dripping onto the wood. Harlan's face didn't change, but something inside him cracked open, old and raw. He saw it again. Another bar, another night, another woman bleeding while men laughed. The memory hit like smoke in the lungs. Voss leaned in. "Now," he said softly, "you gonna tell me what you know? Or do we keep going till the whole town pays for your quiet?" Harlan looked at Sarah, really looked. Her eyes were wide, frightened, but steady on him. Waiting. He straightened, turned fully to face Voss. "Stay away from my ranch," he said. Voice low, but clear enough to carry. "Stay away from this town. You've got 2 days." The saloon went dead quiet. Voss stared. Then he laughed. Genuine this time, surprised. "Or what? You'll add us to your count of 27? Harlan's gaze never wavered. "I'll add you to my ghosts." He reached into his vest pocket, pulled out a single silver dollar, and flicked it onto the bar. It spun once, twice, ringing sharp against the wood before settling flat. The sound cut through the silence like a declaration. Then he walked. Straight through the parted crowd, shoulders square, back straight. Not fast. Not slow, just walking like a man who had already decided the next step, whatever it cost. The doors swung behind him. Outside, the night air hit cold and clean after the smoke-thick room. Main Street lay empty under a scatter of stars. Harlan stopped in the middle of the dirt, boots planted wide. His right hand settled on the Colt. Firm now, no tremor. Behind him, inside the saloon, a fist slammed down on the bar, hard enough to rattle glasses. "Silas," Voss said, voice carrying through the open doors. "Send word, every gun hand in the territory. If he wants to play ghost, we'll give him a hunt worth telling stories about." Boots scraped. Chairs pushed back. Men began to move. Harlan heard it all. He stood alone in the dark street, breath fogging in the chill. His fingers tightened around the grip until the checkering bit into his palm. Somewhere far off, a horse nickered. Then another. More coming in. The old road he'd walked for 5 years, the quiet one, the safe one, was gone. He looked up at the ridgeline where the ranch waited, dark against the stars. Then he started walking. Not toward home. Night came down hard over Bloodstone Valley, thick and cold. The kind that presses against your skin like wet canvas. Caleb Harlan worked by lantern light in the barn, the flame guttering low, throwing long shadows across the hay bales and the stacked crates of ammunition. His hands moved steady, clearing sight lines through the cottonwoods, stringing tripwires between fence posts, checking powder and percussion caps with the slow care of a man who knew every grain mattered. The Colt Navy lay open on the workbench, barrel wiped clean, cylinder spun once to listen for the soft metallic click that had once meant safety and now only meant memory. He paused when he heard the hoofbeats. Single rider, coming fast from the direction of town. Harlan snuffed the lantern with 2 fingers, stepped into the doorway, and waited. Sarah Whitaker reined in hard, breath fogging in the chill. Her coat was buttoned wrong, one sleeve still stained with dried blood from the saloon. She slid down, boots hitting dirt, and thrust a folded paper toward him without preamble. "They're asking about you everywhere," she said, voice low but steady. "Every saloon, every porch. They know you were a lawman once. Someone talked or remembered." Harlan took the note without looking at it yet. His thumb brushed the edge, feeling the faint tremor in her fingers as she let go. Sarah swallowed. "They're not just asking, Harlan. They're promising money for answers. Real money." He nodded once. The valley wind carried the faint smell of smoke. Distant, but close enough to matter. Sarah glanced toward the ridge. Deputy Boone rode out when he saw the first glow. Said he'd scout. He's young. Thinks a badge still means something. Harlan's jaw tightened. He knew what came next. They didn't have to wait long. From the far side of the valley, an orange bloom lifted into the dark, small at first, then spreading. Widow Abby Barlow's old calf shed, the one she kept for strays and sick stock. Flames licked up the dry timbers, crackling loud enough to carry on the wind. Smoke rose in a slow black pillar, blotting stars. Harlan stared at it. Abby's voice echoed in his head from years ago. "This land needs a man who knows how to keep it." Sarah's breath caught. "That's hers." He didn't answer, just turned back into the barn, picked up the Colt Navy, and began loading it again. Slow, deliberate, each cartridge seated with a soft snap. A few minutes later, another rider came pounding up the trail. Deputy Levi Rusty Boone this time, hat gone, left shoulder dark with blood. He slid off the horse, staggered, caught himself on the corral rail. "They jumped me," he rasped. "3 of them. Said I should stay out of their business. I tried to put the fire out." He winced, pressing his palm to the wound. They laughed. Harlan stepped forward, helped the boy sit against the barn wall. Boone's face was pale, eyes wide with the shock of it all. I thought if I showed up, they'd back off." Harlan tore a strip from an old shirt, bound the shoulder tight. "They don't back off." Boone looked up at him, searching. "You gonna let 'em burn the whole valley?" Harlan's hand stilled on the bandage. He thought of the boy's badge, still pinned crooked to his vest. Thought of Sarah's cut hand. Thought of Abby's shed going up in orange and black. A soft flutter came from the rafters. A pigeon, wings beating once as it landed on the beam overhead. Tied to its leg was a small tube. Harlan reached up, unrolled the scrap of paper inside. Sage Whitaker's handwriting. Blocky, hurried. "Ghost rides again. Coming with help." Harlan folded it once, tucked it into his vest. He looked at Boone, then at Sarah, standing silent in the doorway. "Not again," he whispered. So low only he heard it. "Not here." He stood, walked to the porch rail, and stared out at the valley. The calf shed fire had died down to coals, but the smoke still rose, thick and accusing. Somewhere farther off, more lights flickered, campfires maybe, or lanterns, more than there should be. Harlan checked the Colt one last time, then the Remington. His fingers moved without thought, muscle memory older than the ranch, older than Silver Ridge. He felt the weight of every year he'd tried to bury. Boone coughed, trying to stand. "What do we do?" Harlan didn't answer right away. He looked toward the town, small lights still burning in windows, stubborn against the dark, then back at the ridge where the ranch sat exposed. He exhaled slow. The first gray light of false dawn began to creep over the eastern hills. Harlan saw them then, thin threads of smoke rising from 3 different points along the valley rim. Not one fire, 3. Voss had divided his men. They were closing the circle. Hooves sounded again, lighter this time, frantic. Widow Abby Barlow came riding up the trail, old shotgun across her saddle, face set hard. She pulled the horse to a stop, slid down, boots hitting ground with purpose. She looked at the smoke, at the bound deputy, at Harlan standing on the porch with both guns belted low. "This is our home too," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We're not running." Harlan met her eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he looked past her, toward Silver Ridge, toward the people who had begun, without knowing it, to stand with him. The valley went quiet, except for the soft crackle of distant embers and the first birds waking in the junipers. Harlan turned back to the barn, picked up a coil of wire and a box of nails. He started walking toward the ridgeline. The fog rolled thick along the ridgeline behind Barlow Ranch, heavy and gray, swallowing sound and distance until the world narrowed to the wet scrape of boots on rock and the slow drip of moisture from pine needles. Caleb Harlan crouched behind a fallen ponderosa, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the faint trail that snaked down into Bloodstone Valley. The air tasted of wet earth and resin, sharp enough to cut through the ache in his shoulder where an old scar still pulled when the cold settled in. He heard them before he saw them. 3 riders moving careful through the mist, horses stepping soft as if they knew the ground might give way. Marshal Elias Crow came first, gray coat darkened by fog, face lined deeper than Harlan remembered. Running Wolf followed, dark hair braided tight, Winchester across his saddle. Jedediah Jed Kane brought up the rear, the youngest of them then, not so young now, eyes still carrying the same haunted flicker from Black Mesa. They dismounted without a word. Crow tied his horse to a low branch, then walked straight to Harlan and stopped an arm's length away. "We all came," Crow said, voice rough from years of dust and tobacco. "Every one of us who rode with you after Black Mesa." Harlan looked up. The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples he couldn't stop. He nodded once, slow. Running Wolf stepped closer, squatting beside him. His breath came steady, calm. "The wolf that hunts alone dies alone," he said quietly. "Remember, you have brothers." Harlan met the Apache's eyes for a long moment. Something in them, recognition, maybe forgiveness, made the knot in his chest loosen just enough to breathe. He reached down, unbuckled the cross-draw holster he'd kept hidden under the duster for 5 years. The Remington 1858 came out into the open air, metal dull in the fog. He checked the loads, 5 chambers, 1 empty under the hammer, then buckled it on his left hip, beside the Colt Navy. For the first time since he'd ridden into Silver Ridge, both guns rode visible. Jed Kane watched the motion, then looked away toward the valley. "Folks down there are talking," he said. "They're saying Shade Harlan's the ghost of Black Mesa, the one who killed 27 men and walked away clean." Harlan's fingers paused on the Remington's grip. Down in Silver Ridge, the whispers had already begun to harden into something sharper. Sarah Whitaker had felt it when she opened the store that morning, eyes sliding away, conversation stopping when she approached the counter. A woman who'd once bought thread from her now crossed the street. Widow Abby Barlow had found the same chill when she tried to buy feed at the livery. The hostler muttering about folks who bring trouble. Even Dr. Elias Thorne had spent the night stitching up a young drover who'd taken a club to the ribs for telling Voss's men to leave the ranch alone. The wound wasn't deep, but the look in the boy's eyes when Thorne asked why he'd spoken up stayed with the doctor long after the sutures were tied. Harlan felt the weight of it settle across his shoulders. Not just the guns, but the names people were starting to pin on him again. Ghost. Killer. The man who'd hunted until nothing was left to hunt. Crow crouched beside him now, elbows on knees. "They're coming," he said. "More than 30 now. Calhoun's with 'em, Lightning Jack. He knows the stories, told Voss straight. He ain't no joke. I seen him work once." Silas just smiled and said, "Then we'll make him show it to the whole damn town." Harlan stared down through the thinning mist. The valley floor lay spread out below, Barlow Ranch small and exposed, Silver Ridge a cluster of lantern glows still burning against the gray. He could see the black flags now, snapping on poles as the Voss riders moved into position. 3 groups fanning out, closing the jaws of the trap. He thought of Sarah's cut hand, Abby's burned shed, Rusty Boone's bandaged shoulder. Thought of the boy in Thorne's office who'd bled for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. Thought of the 27 graves he'd left behind, and the one he'd never dug for himself. The fog began to lift, slow and reluctant, letting the first pale light touch the ridgeline. Harlan stood. The Remington settled against his hip like an old promise kept. He looked at Crow, at Running Wolf, at Jed. "It ends today," he whispered. From the far side of the valley came the low thunder of hooves. Not Voss's men, but another group riding hard along the old stage road. Sheriff Boone Garrett's voice carried faint on the wind, calling orders to men who'd finally decided enough was enough. But Voss was closer. Harlan drew the Colt Navy, thumbed back the hammer with a soft metallic snap. The sound echoed once, then died in the lifting fog. He stepped forward to the edge of the ridge, boots crunching wet gravel. Below, the black flags dipped and rose as the riders turned toward the ranch. No clean victory waited down there, only blood, and the cost of letting the ghost out of the grave one more time. Harlan exhaled once, long, steady, and started down the trail. Dawn broke thin and gray over Bloodstone Valley, the kind of light that reveals more than it hides. Fog clung low to the ground, turning the grass silver and muting the first shots into dull coughs. Caleb Harlan moved down the ridgeline with the Vengeance riders at his back, Crow to his right, Running Wolf silent on the left, Jed Kane covering the rear. They didn't speak. Words had run out somewhere between the ridge and the ranch below. The first wave came from the west. Lightning Jack Calhoun's men, dark shapes on horseback, carbines cracking as they charged the corral. Harlan dropped behind a boulder, the Colt Navy steady in his hands. He fired once, clean, measured, and a rider pitched sideways, horse screaming as it veered. The valley answered with more gunfire. From the south Ramon El Cuervo, Valdez's crew pushed forward. From the east, Bo and Clay Harlan's brothers flanked the barn. Harlan Black Voss held the center with Silas and Zeke, black flags snapping wet in the rising wind. Then the rain started. It came sudden and hard, turning dust to mud, muffling sound until the world narrowed to the slap of water on oilskin and the wet pop of percussion caps. Harlan's duster darkened, heavy with rain. He moved low through the cottonwoods, breath even, eyes scanning. Running Wolf vanished into the mist like smoke. A moment later, a scream cut short from Valdez's line. Jed Kane's rifle barked twice from the ridge, 2 riders down. The fight shifted. Voss's men pushed toward the ranch house, but the townsfolk were already there. Sarah Whitaker fired from the store window, shotgun bucking against her shoulder. Widow Abby Barlow stood on her porch with her old scattergun, face set like stone. Dr. Elias Thorne worked from the jail doorway, dragging a wounded drover inside, while bullets chewed the frame. Deputy Levi Rusty Boone, shoulder still bandaged, knelt behind a water trough and squeezed off shots with a trembling hand. Harlan reached the barn first. Lightning Jack Calhoun rode straight at him, ivory-handled Colts flashing. Harlan stepped aside, Colt rising. Jack fired twice. One bullet clipped Harlan's hat brim, the other buried in the barn wall. Harlan returned fire once. Jack's horse reared as the man jerked, then slid sideways into the mud. He hit the ground hard, rolled, came up on one knee. "I'm done," Jack rasped, hands raised. His gun stayed holstered. Harlan nodded once. No words. He moved on. The rain hammered harder. Harlan pushed toward the livery stable in the center of town. Voss was there, Black Voss himself. Silas at his side, Zeke laughing drunk and wild on the porch. Harlan stepped into the open doorway, water streaming from his hat brim. Black Voss turned slow, coat dripping, smile gone. 8 years, Harlan said, voice low, carrying over the rain. 8 years I waited for this. Voss laughed, short, bitter. You waited, I lived. Silas stepped forward, hands loose at his sides. I was there that night, at Black Mesa. His voice cracked just once. We thought you burned with them. Harlan's eyes never left Voss. You thought wrong. Silas reached. Harlan fired. The bullet took him high in the chest. Silas folded like wet paper, sliding down the wall. Zeke howled, drunk rage boiling over. He drew, fanning the hammer wild. Bullets sprayed the doorway. One grazed Harlan's arm. Hot sting, blood mixing with rain. Another punched through the livery wall behind him. From the shadows Running Wolf appeared, silent, sudden. His knife flashed once. Zeke staggered, hand to his throat, eyes wide. He dropped to his knees in the mud, gurgling. Black Voss drew then, fast, practiced. Harlan met him square. Both guns came up together. Thunder rolled overhead and on the ground. Voss's shot went wide, splintering wood. Harlan's hit true, center chest. Voss stared down at the hole, surprise flickering across his face, then nothing. He fell backward into the straw, eyes open, rain washing across them. The shooting died slow. Scattered pops from the outskirts faded. Harlan stood in the doorway, rain drumming on the tin roof above. His arm burned, but he didn't look at it. Crow appeared at his shoulder, coat torn, left arm held tight against his side, fresh blood seeping through the sleeve. It's over, he said quietly. Harlan stepped outside. The street lay empty except for bodies and horses standing head down in the downpour. Mud ran red in the wheel ruts. He walked forward, boots sucking at the ground. Then he saw the boy. A kid, no more than 12, lay face down near the trough, arms flung wide. A small herd dog whined beside him, nosing the still form. The boy had been chousing strays out of the way when Zeke's wild shots caught him. One bullet high in the back, no chance. Harlan stopped. Rain poured off his hat, dripping onto the boy's coat. He knelt slow, knees sinking into the mud. His hand reached out, hesitant, then rested on the small shoulder. The boy didn't move. For the first time in years, Harlan's hand shook. Not from cold, not from the wound. Just shook. Crow stood behind him, silent. The rain kept falling, washing blood into the street, carrying it toward the gutter. Harlan stayed there a long minute, rain drumming on his back, thunder rolling distant now. Then he stood. The valley lay quiet except for the rain and the soft crying of the dog. Nothing was over. Not really. A week after the rain stopped, the valley still carried the smell of wet ash and gunpowder. Thin threads of smoke rose from blackened patches where fires had burned out. Abby Barlow's calf shed reduced to charred timbers, a corner of the livery stable splintered and sagging. The wind moved slow through Bloodstone Valley now, carrying the faint metallic bite of drying blood and the sweeter rot of trampled grass. Autumn had come early. The cottonwoods along the creek were already turning gold and brittle, leaves drifting like spent cartridges. Caleb Harlan sat on the porch of Barlow Ranch, elbows on his knees, staring at the horizon where the dragoons cut sharp against a sky the color of old iron. His left shoulder ached under the fresh bandage. Dr. Thorne had stitched it tight 2 days earlier, muttering about infection while his hands shook from lack of sleep. The scar would be ugly, puckered and raised, a permanent reminder that flesh gave way easier than memory. He hadn't spoken much since the livery stable. Words felt heavier now, like stones he wasn't sure he could carry anymore. Hooves sounded on the trail below. Slow, deliberate. Widow Abby Barlow rode up on her old sorrel, a cloth-wrapped bundle tied behind the saddle. She dismounted stiffly, boots sinking into soft earth still damp from the storm. Her face was lined deeper than before, eyes shadowed but steady. She climbed the steps without hurry, set the bundle on the rail beside him. Cornbread, beans, a small jar of preserves she'd managed to save from the wreckage of her pantry. "This is our home too," she said quietly. Her voice carried the same calm resolve she'd had the morning she'd ridden in with a shotgun. "We didn't run from the Voss Gang. We won't run now." Harlan looked at her. For a long moment, neither moved. Then he reached out, took the bundle, set it on the floorboards between them. His fingers brushed hers, rough, calloused, trembling just once before he pulled back. "Thank you," he said. The words came out low, almost lost in the wind. Abby nodded once. She turned to go, paused at the top step. "They're saying things in town. About you. About what you did." She looked back over her shoulder. "Some folks cross the street when they see you coming. Others, they tip their hats." Harlan didn't answer. He watched her ride away, the sorrel's tail switching against the flies. Down in Silver Ridge, the whispers had spread like prairie fire after a dry summer. Ghost of Black Mesa came back, they said in the saloon, voices dropping low over whiskey glasses. Saved the town. But quieter voices added, he brought death with him. Sarah Whittaker still wore the long sleeve rolled down over the scar on her forearm, deep, jagged from flying glass. Every time she caught her reflection in the store window, she remembered the crack of Zeke's hand, the taste of blood in her mouth. She kept working, kept smiling at customers, but the smile never reached her eyes anymore. Deputy Levi Rusty Boone sat on the jail porch most afternoons, left leg propped on a crate, crutch leaning against the wall. The bullet had shattered bone. Thorne said he'd walk again, but never run. Never chase outlaws across open ground. The boy stared at his badge sometimes, like it belonged to someone else. Inside Thorne's office, Lightning Jack Calhoun, once feared from Kansas to the Rio Grande, worked in silence, rolling bandages, cleaning instruments. His hands, steady with a gun, proved steadier with needle and thread. He hadn't spoken of redemption. He didn't need to. When a child came in with a splintered finger or a miner with a crushed hand, Jack simply did the work. Redemption, if it came, would be quiet. Marshal, Elias Crow, and the others had ridden out 2 days earlier. Crow's shoulder bandaged, Running Wolf's face unreadable. Jed Kane glancing back once before they disappeared over the ridge. Sage Whittaker had stayed longest. He found Harlan on the porch that evening, leaned against the rail, and watched the sun bleed red across the valley. "Men like Harlan," Thorne had said to Sage earlier, voice tired but certain, "are the price of civilization out here. We sleep safe because they stand ready to do violence on our behalf." Sage had only nodded. Now Sage looked at Harlan. "You staying?" Harlan stared at the horizon. The last light caught the new scar on his shoulder, turning it silver for a moment. "Some ghosts can find peace," he whispered, almost to himself, "even if they can't find rest." Sage waited a beat, then mounted up. He touched his hat brim once, slow, respectful, and rode away down the trail toward Silver Ridge. The hoofbeats faded, swallowed by the gathering dusk. Harlan stayed on the porch until full dark settled. The valley went quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a night bird. He touched the Colt Navy at his hip, still there, still heavy, then let his hand fall. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle sounded, faint, tentative, the first promise of the rail spur coming closer. Silver Ridge would grow. People would come. They would learn to watch the horizons themselves, to keep their own shotguns close. But Harlan knew the wind would keep blowing through the valley. And when it did, carrying the scent of sage and pine and old smoke, folks would still whisper about the ghost. Some would thank him. Some would fear him. Most would simply look away. He rose slow, walked inside the ranch house. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Outside, the stars came out one by one, cold, distant, watching. In the dark of the barn, a horse shifted, nickering once. Harlan didn't sleep much anymore, but he stayed. "Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths. Some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours. Thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal, barra disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.